on to topic number two. The Nintendo Switch 2 is coming out next year at some point, probably. So there's been numerous rumors that have come out. Apparently, there are developer kits in people's hands and developers' hands, but we obviously don't have a concrete release date from Nintendo. But even within the leakers and the rumor people, there's there's a little bit of a divide. So some people are saying early 2024. Some people are saying in the second half of 2024. It's rumored to have cost $399, which is only $50 more than the OLED Switch. But apparently, it's not coming with an OLED screen. They're going to go back to an LCD display. There's some rumors that there's going to be a co-processor chip that lives in the dock to help with performance and boost in performance, so that okay, when it's docked, it can output game footage at 4K. But I would say, if you ask me, I think that's just wishful thinking. I think we're definitely at the point with this console or this eventual console that people have had so much time to think of what they want and what they wish it could do and what they hope it could do, that now we're just conflating, like, okay, what is actual solid fact and what has someone mentioned as being a possible feature at some point, that now it's kind of just gotten lost, that okay, this isn't hasn't actually been confirmed by anyone. This is just what people would like to see from it. And people would like to see a lot from it. But, what kind of rumors have you heard about the Nintendo Switch 2? And do you think it's actually going to come out next year? Do you think it would still just wishful thinking? What are your thoughts on this OLED display or what are your thoughts on this LCD display after we just got the OLED Switch?
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point there of the amount of rumors compared. They're not created equal. There are some rumors that are just wishful thinking, or like you mentioned, people ruminating on what they wanted a Switch successor to be like for so long that, these things have become rumors. But there are some rumors out there that I think are a little bit more credible than others. One of them, like you mentioned, is the dev kits being out. Apparently, developers have, off the record, spoken about receiving dev kits for the next version of the Switch, or, the successor to the Switch, which I think is important. Generally, I would have hoped for those to go out even sooner, but usually what happens is when a new console is coming out, Nintendo will talk to developers and say, hey, this is what we're planning on hitting, so you can start developing stuff for it. And then, closer to that date, hopefully, usually you want it to be more than a year out, you send them those dev kits, or you let them purchase the dev kits so that they can tailor the experiences that they're making specifically for that hardware and kind of dial it in so that it's ready for launch window. That probably won't happen here with dev kits coming out this late, because to your question there of, do I think it's going to come out next year? Yes, I do. On an earnings call, the president of Nintendo did come out and say there will be no new hardware in this fiscal year. So no hardware between now and March of 2024. I think that makes sense. I do think we see potentially an announcement at the end of this year, like a teaser announcement, maybe at the Game Awards. And then around March, we get a full kind of unveiling of what it's going to be. And that launches in holiday of 2024. I think that's probably what will happen. That is what it's looking like. A lot of the rumors from developers seem to be pointing in that direction. And then the third rumor that I think is a little bit more solid than the others is the LCD screen. It seems like that's probably going to be the case. It's going to be an LCD screen, not an OLED. And I think this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, like you mentioned, there is already a Switch OLED that people really like. The screen on the Switch OLED is very highly reviewed. People talk about it being great. It's manufactured by Samsung. But the original Switch and also handheld devices like the Steam Deck, which use LCD screens, have been critically, panned for how bad their screens are. And I still use, well, I shouldn't say I still use, I haven't used my Switch in a long time because my Joy-Cons are broken. And it doesn't make sense to buy new ones at this point because they're over $100. But, those screens aren't great. Most people do not want screens like that. I do not think the Switch 2, even if it is using an LCD screen is going to have as bad a screen as that. We were just talking about the PlayStation Portal. That has an LCD screen. It looks kind of good from the videos that I've seen. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets a high quality LCD screen, maybe even at 1080p. Although I do think 720p would be fine, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did come out at a higher resolution. And it's just a much better quality than what the Switch was. I think that's where a lot of the fear comes in, is that people might be afraid that they're going to get a screen similar to what the original Switch was, and I think it's going to be much better than that, even though it is going to be LCD. But yeah, I do think this is going to launch in holiday of 2024. The price point, it's going to go up. I think that rumor is probably going to be true, but I think it's a mistake. I think they should be trying to hit the $299 price point, but I think in 2024 that's going to be very difficult, especially if they're looking for something that's a little bit more powerful. I have always said I think it would be smart for them to package the dock and the Switch separately just to make it cheaper, because in that case you can hit a price point that will catch more people. But it's kind of like what Xbox has done with the Series S. Hitting that $299 price point has been huge for that being a kind of success. I think there was some statistics brought out that about 50% of people who bought a Series S are new to Xbox or didn't have an Xbox One, which isn't surprising because Xbox One was a huge failure. But I think that's the point. That's the power of having that under $300 price point, even if it's by a cent. It's that mental barrier that, okay, no, we can all pick this up, and I think that's what helped the Switch be so successful as well. So yeah, I think those are the big three rumors that are probably true. Coming out next year, probably holiday, going to have an LCD screen, and dev kits are currently out for development. Some of the other ones that are interesting that I don't necessarily believe, but I'm kind of curious to get your impression on, is one, the console launching with a Mario Kart game, which I think would be pretty good considering that Mario Kart has been going since the Wii U. A new version of that would be really cool. And two, the fact that it might not be called a Switch. And might be going with a different name altogether. I don't know if this has to do with the fear of Nintendo using similar names in the past. For example, going from the DS to the 3DS. The 3DS, although very successful to its end, in the beginning struggled. And also, obviously, the Wii U was a huge struggle. Maybe they're afraid that using names too similar to previous consoles maybe don't get people interested in buying it. Maybe they don't think it's something new. Maybe they don't uh, know exactly what that is. Like the confusion with the Wii to the Wii U. Some people thought it was just an attachment or to the original Wii. But me personally, I think it would be stupid to drop the Switch name. I think calling it the Super Switch or the Switch 2 would be the best option. Switch 2 is a very self-explanatory name. It's a sequel to this very, popular device. But I'm curious to see what your opinion is. Do you think that if they change the Switch name, that's a smart decision? That's a dumb decision? Do you think calling it the Super Switch or the Switch 2 could potentially be confusing to some consumers?
I think it would be dumb if they changed the name just because, like you said, it's such a popular device. Everybody knows what a Switch is. So it'd be very easy to get people interested in it if you stick with the Switch name. If you go and call it something completely different, like I don't know, the Nintendo game panel or something like that. That would confuse people a lot. I also think it would be confusing if you call it the Switch 2 or the Super Switch and then it comes out with an LCD screen. I know
Mm,
it's not the end of the world, and yes, there are high quality LCD screens, but I mean, and I'm sure that they will come out with an LCD screen because Nintendo always cheaps out on hardware, and that's just kind of their MO.
yeah.
But the thing with Nintendo is like, okay, whereas PlayStation and Xbox, they're almost like in an arms race with each other. Like, how powerful of a device can we build? how much, how many teraflops can we pack into this? How many gigahertz can this processor be? Like, as they're focused on that, and Nintendo is just focused on the gaming experience. And obviously, they've shown that you don't need the biggest and the best hardware to be to make successful games and to be a successful gaming company. They've proven that. That's been their MO since the N64, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe more since the GameCube. But I think if you call it the Switch 2, people are expecting it to be better than the last Switch. And if it then comes out and it's like, oh, this has a worse display technically than the last one, and then, obviously depending on what processor they come out with. But I mean, if I had to bet money on it, I'm guessing they'd probably use another old processor. I doubt they'd use something that's, a current generation. I think they're supposed to be using NVIDIA chips. I doubt they're going to use something from either this year or next year. They'd probably do the same thing they did last Switch. Maybe not something that's 7 years old, but maybe, okay, we're going to use last year's chip or a 2 year old chip. So I think they need to stick with the Switch name, but I also think, and I could already see the headlines now. It's like, why is the Switch 2's worse than the OLED Switch?
Mm.
Or why this new Switch is worse than the original Switch, or the Super Switch is super bad. Like, and that's the unfortunate thing is like, that Apple is going to overcharge you for simple things, and that Nintendo's probably going to cheap out on hardware,
Yeah.
and that's just what the companies do. But they're successful. They're both very successful companies. But it's kind of like, I'm not gonna get my hopes up for an OLED screen and a brand new custom designed NVIDIA chip, and I'm not gonna get my hopes up for 4K output, and I'm not even gonna get my hopes up for a 1080p screen, even though yes, 720 more than fine, but also like it's 2020 or it's gonna be 2024. Like, come on now. You can get budget Android devices,
With OLEDs.
for $200 with OLEDs, 120 hertz that are also working phones too,
Yeah.
right? That can shoot 4K video, that have Bluetooth built into them, so you can use Bluetooth headphones. Like, there's so many things that Nintendo just isn't including, and it's just Nintendo being Nintendo. But I think they need to stick with the Switch name. I don't know you know, what kind of adjective or what they're gonna add onto it to make it okay. This is distinctly a new generation of consoles, right? And even you mentioned the naming thing is like Nintendo's terrible with naming,
Hmm.
or maybe they're just terrible with naming sequels. Because I don't know, N64 pretty cool, GameCube pretty cool, Wii pretty cool, Switch, pretty cool. But then, as you mentioned, there's the 3DS, there's the DS, the 3DS, the 3DS XL, the
Yeah.
2DS, like
The DSi, the
the
DS.
DSi, the
Yeah.
DS Lite. Like, just come out with a new console instead of a million different iterations. And even with the current Switch, okay, Switch makes sense. Switch Lite makes sense. Switch OLED is like it's kind of a lazy name.
Yeah.
That's a very lazy name. But either way, whenever they come out with this console, which, as you pointed out, probably going to be holiday season 2024, I'm sure it's going to do well. Sure, it's going to be sold out. I'm definitely going to try and buy one. And yeah, Mario Kart would be great. It's been far too long with Mario Kart 8, even if it's okay, they're on deluxe now and they have new maps that they've added to it. Put out a new game, Nintendo.
Hmm.
But are you interested in the Switch? Are you, or whatever, the Switch, the Super Switch 2? Are you interested in it? And from what you've heard in terms of okay, LCD display, 60 hertz, if you could talk about what kind of processing power you think it's going to have, but are you excited for this new Switch console, and do you see yourself trying to buy one, or do you think, okay, I'm going to wait for it to come out, maybe I'll wait for like a year or two, see how the reviews are, see maybe something else is coming out in the pipeline, or do you think you're going to try and get it right when it comes out?
That's a tough one because the original Switch I didn't plan on buying when it came out, and I just saw it in the store one day, and I'm like, you know what, I got to get that. Um, and that doesn't usually happen to me. I've wanted an Xbox, really haven't picked one up. I haven't had the urge to pick one up, even seeing one in stores. So I do think that there's a good chance I'll end up getting a Switch successor, the Switch 2, whatever it ends up being called. But there are a few things that I'm concerned about with it. The LCD screen, I'm a little bit concerned, but you brought up a good point. OLEDs aren't like this super expensive premium screen tech that doesn't exist on budget devices. It's on so many budget phones and stuff like that. It doesn't seem like it would be that much of a stretch to get an OLED screen on a successor to the Switch. So I feel like there must be a reason why they're going with an LCD. Um, and I imagine that reason must be some kind of tech related reason. Maybe they're going for, higher refresh rate. It's usually easier to get higher refresh rate LCDs, despite the fact that OLEDs have a lower response time. Um, Maybe it's just, the OLEDs are coming out of Korea. Maybe you got some LCDs coming out of Japan. Maybe Sharp. I know there was some rumors that Sharp was making some LCD screens, but I think that was for the PlayStation Portal. But maybe they're like, hey, we can get these cheaper locally. I don't know. Um, so yeah, the LCD thing doesn't bother me much. One kind of speculation that does kind of concern me, and this doesn't kind of coincide with any of those rumors that we were talking about, but it's the idea that this might not have backwards compatibility. And
Mm.
I'm never gonna get rid of my original Switch. Like I said, that's one of my favorite consoles, if not my favorite console of all time. And I can't wait for a lot of used games to go on the market and garage sales and stuff like that. I'm gonna pick up as many games as I can. But the idea of not having backwards compatibility is definitely a little bit concerning. And a lot of that comes from the fact that NVIDIA chips don't really have backwards compatibility built in from generation to generation. And this will be using a much different generation than the Switch because, like you mentioned, the Switch chip is so old. Um, so there apparently was some concerns that it wouldn't be able to play Switch games. Bit of a concern. Uh, and then also the price. Like I mentioned, I think that $299 price point is critical. I do think that they should try to hit that as much as possible, even if they're taking a bit of a loss in the beginning. Uh, the one interesting thing about the original Switch is that rare for consoles, but Nintendo was making a profit from the very beginning of that device because of how, I don't want to say cheaply made, but
They're cheap.
conservatively made it was made, so they were able to price that relatively aggressively, but still make money off of it. And now I'm sure they're making an insane amount of money margin on those devices. Um, so yeah, I think even if they do have to go backwards a little bit on that, I think it's smart to try to hit that $299 price point. But yeah, I don't think Nintendo's going to do that. $349 sounds probably what they're going to be hitting. Um, I hope it doesn't go to $399. Even if it is much
It's
more
going
powerful,
to.
uh, you know, I don't think they can compete with the Steam Deck at that price. So yeah, it's gonna be weird. And then another thing I'll add to that, because my Switch has been pretty much out of commission because of how bad the Joy-Con drift has been. I have been using the Steam Deck more, and because I've been using that more, even though I'd rather use the Switch in a lot of games, it's made me less, you know, I don't know, words excited. Not excited isn't the right word, but less like I'm not as ready for the Switch 2. Like I'm not. I think if I didn't have the Steam Deck, I'd want to buy it like right now.
Mhm.
But because I have the Steam Deck, it's kind of held me over a little bit, and I've kind of really enjoyed using that device. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting thing. I do agree with you, Mario Kart. We need a new version of that. We have heard rumors of uh potential another uh, Smash Bros. Although I do think Smash Bros has gotten as good as it can possibly be. I think just re-releasing that game, maybe with all the DLC and stuff like that again, might be the right way to go because I don't think you can make a better game than that at this point. But yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know. Is there anything in particular with a sequel to the Switch that the Switch doesn't have that you want to see? Like personally, I would love to see better joysticks. Um, I don't know if it's going to include the removable Joy Cons. I think that's a cool idea. But is there anything for you in particular, other than OLED screen, that you're like, I really need a Switch successor to have this? Maybe something that's on your PS5 or on the Steam Deck that you think it needs?
I would say backwards compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a pretty big one that you brought up there. I mean, I don't have a huge library, but and I same like you, I'm never gonna give up my Switch. It's also one of my favorite consoles, if not my favorite console ever. Um, but I think it would be a huge missed opportunity if I couldn't play, my old Switch games, like the Breath of the Wild, like Tears of the Kingdom, like my
Mm-hmm.
Smash Bros, even Mario Party. If I couldn't play those games on my new Switch, I think, I mean, that would be a loss in terms of user experience. I would say that. And then backwards compatibility with the controllers, like whether it be the Joy Cons, that'd be great if they could. If this old Joy Cons would work on the new console, and if they also updated the Joy Con so they don't drift
Yeah.
as much. If they manufacture them better. But like I have Joy Cons, I have Pro controllers, I have the GameCube Pro controller. It'd be great if I could use those with the new console also. I'm sure there'll be some sort of new, button configurations or maybe some new sort of, haptic feedback technology. But just let me use my old stuff too.
Yeah.
So I guess yeah, like backwards compatibility would be the biggest thing or one of the biggest things. OLED I would put up there, but in front of that I would put a current processor.
Mm.
And as I said, you don't, Nintendo doesn't push the hardware. They don't have the best hardware, but they have amazing game experiences. And I know I'm going to trust them for that. They're going to do that. But you could still have a great gaming experience and great hardware. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say if I had to choose one, it's tough. Like, I want to say backwards compatibility with games and with hardware. But then does that mean that we have a worse device? Because okay, in order to be backwards compatible, we have to use this older NVIDIA chip so that you could still play the same games and you could use the same hardware and people don't lose out on the catalog that they've built out. Yeah, I don't know. I really wish I could play my old stuff on the new one, but as you said, I'm gonna keep my console anyways, so it's not gonna be the end of the world if I can't. But yeah, I think they need to beef up the hardware, whether it's or not whether they should have an OLED and they should have a current generation chip.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't need something that's not coming out until 2025 and you have some special custom built version that Nvidia is giving you early. You don't need that, you know. But at least something from this year, this decade, right?
Well, let me ask you this then. This will never happen, but let's say the device came out with a nice OLED screen and power similar to what like the ROG Ally or even the Steam Deck is, but it's $400. Do you think that is a better decision than maybe having something that's less powerful with an LCD screen at 300 or 350? Where do you kind of land in that? Do you think they should go for the more powerful, more expensive, you know, priced in line with what the other consoles are, or stick to being the budget kind of Switch like console that's not as powerful but also much more accessible for more people?
I'd say go more powerful
Mm.
as long as it's clearly under the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X.
Hmm.
I'd say go more powerful because they're still gonna release a Switch Lite at some point or Switch Lite 2 or whatever they want to call it
Yeah.
at some point. So then okay, at that point, you could tone down the power a bit. You could make it a more budget friendly console. But I would say especially because the Switch One was so underpowered, I'd say go more powerful for the start of this next generation, and then you do your iterations after that. But yeah, I would gladly pay $400 if it had an OLED screen, if it had a more powerful chip, and it was still backwards compatible. Gladly.
Interesting. I like that take, because then it brings you closer to parity with the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles. And then you can use the light versions of that maybe a year or two later to be like, okay, it's smaller. Maybe it doesn't have TV out like the current light does, and you can save money there. Maybe you save $100 there, going from $399 to $299. Yeah, I think that could make a lot of sense.
Yeah.